Okay, so my name is Catherine White. I am a member of the Environmental Futures and Big Data Impact Lab, which is where you are today for this ExIST quarterly event. So just to say a little bit about the Impact Lab. So we are a partnership of 7 Devon-based research institutions that are all listed across the bottom here. This is a Met Office building here, and I work for the University of Exeter. And we also have some of our University of Plymouth partners here. And what we do is we help Devon-based small, medium enterprises to do innovative things with big data and in the environmental space. So I won't say too much about it, but if you're interested in that, if you have a small business that needs some technical support with developing something exciting with big data, then please do come and have a chat. But for now, I'm going to hand over to our chair for the event, Dave Underwood, to take things away.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, can you all hear me? Yeah, good. Righto. Well, welcome to this fantastic event today, and it's all about can Exeter be a world leader in air quality? And we've got 3 presenters today who I hope are going to give you very stimulating thoughts about the position of Exeter, the research that we're doing, and what differences we can make. Has anybody ever seen pictures of places like Tokyo, Jakarta, New Delhi? A lot of people walking around with white masks all day long within the cities. That's what happens when air quality goes wrong. When you allow emissions and particulates to be all pervasive in your environment, and you end up with an environment that's really just not good to live in. Well, we don't want that happening in Exeter, but we do have some of the institutions and some of the research and some of the businesses who have the knowledge to address some of those challenges. So without further ado, we're going to go to our first speaker, and that's Mr. Mark Roberts, and he is CEO of Lightfoot, a very innovative company who are trying to help us breathe more easily in the Exeter and surrounding regions, and indeed anywhere where Lightfoot is used. So Mark, if I can invite you to the table.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you for the warm welcome. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming to this event, which is brilliant, totally topical with what we should be looking at as globally, what we should be looking at as a region, and right in the center of what I do all day, every day, and what my businesses do. So I appreciate you listening to me. My name's Mark Roberts. I'm the CEO of Lightfoot and Ashe Woods Electric Motors, 2 businesses based just outside of Exeter, doing some pretty cool stuff, which I'm going to tell you about. The question of the day is, can Exeter become a leader in air quality? The answer of which is obviously yes. I mean, I genuinely feel it anyway. As I say, I do all day, every day is working on products, building products, testing products and selling products that are purely focused on reducing carbon emissions and improving safety and so on. So I feel it is happening. We've got some really disruptive stuff going on here, and it's very exciting times. So I've been asked to talk about the businesses that I'm involved in, and I'm going to start with my personal journey that I've taken to get here, to get to a point where we're purely focused on making drivers more efficient and safer, and the other business is focused on making vehicles more efficient. That's our pure focus, but it hasn't always been that way. I started on the other side of the tracks, if you like. I started off, believe it or not, my first entrepreneurial business was selling raffle tickets in airports to win supercars. I can see a couple of people nodding. You may have seen them in airports around London, across Europe. Lovely, shiny, beautiful cars that you can win for the price of a slightly overpriced raffle ticket. It was all totally genuine. People won each and every single vehicle. But wow, it's a long way from what I'm doing today. It was an interesting lesson though, because I was this was back in 2002 to about 2007. Spent a lot of time on the stands at our sites across Europe. I've always been passionate about cars. What I saw is the whole world is passionate about cars. There's just a shared passion across nations, across cultures. on cars and on driving. We'd have people coming up to us talking about their vehicle history and their driving experience. They'd stroke the cars, they'd sit in the cars. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. But I did also notice over the years that the attitude towards cars and motoring was starting to change. More people would comment on, yeah, but these kind of cars are bad for the environment. And, you get people being really, really quite rude about what we were doing because they're, killing the planet. We did obviously bring up the irony of the fact that they were in an airport and about to get on a plane. But that aside, there was definitely a change even back then. So I got out of that business in about 2007 and wanted to stay in the automotive sector, in vehicles, in cars, but I wanted to get into cleaner stuff, cleaner, greener motoring. That was the way ahead, I thought. And that's what we did. So I actually basically invested in a guy with a plan, an inventor with an idea who wanted to make a hybrid commercial vehicle, who wanted to take a Ford Transit and turn it into a Toyota Prius and start selling it around the world. And that's what we did. And believe it or not, timing is perfect. But that is back in, I can't remember, 2008, 2009, I can't quite remember. When he was mayor of London, I hate to say this, but I owe everything, our business owes everything to the white Ford Transit van and to Boris Johnson. Because we developed this really cool hybrid vehicle. It was a retrofit hybrid kit. Imagine a Toyota Prius technology retrofitting to a transit van, really clever. Plugs into the engine, listening to engine data, so we know when the vehicle was braking and decelerating, we were charging the battery. When it was accelerating, we were putting down extra energy via the electric motor to the rear wheels. Therefore, it used less fuel. Really cool technology, nice, easy, didn't need to plug in, saved about 20% on fuel and emissions in the labs. Boris and the Department for Transport provided a grant, which allowed us to sell our prototype vehicles to public sector fleets, and they got grants for buying it. So basically they were getting a hybrid van for the price of a diesel van. It was brilliant. It gave us sort of proof of life, if you like. We were a tiny business at the time, but it gave us revenue. And we had to take the technology through VCA approval, type approval, all the formal stuff to get it approved. It was a great, great experience, great technology. And it was the reason behind the two businesses that we now have. And so the two businesses are Ashe Woods Electric Motors, that makes electric motors, and Lightfoot, which I'm going to talk about a bit later. Now, we don't do that hybrid vehicle anymore, but the reason I mentioned it is it is the reason for everything, in that on the motors side, we needed a motor in our hybrid vehicle. We tried motors from all around the world. None of them quite gave us the right balance of sort of price and performance that we needed for our vehicle application. So in the end, we ended up making our own, developing our own motor, used it in our hybrid vehicle, worked a treat, and we thought, hang on a second, we're only using this great motor in one application. We do much better to sell it to other people. We've solved a problem that we had. Other people have probably got that problem too. So now we span out Ashe Woods Electric Motors. We're now manufacturing electric motors for global vehicle manufacturers. We're making them here in Exeter. Everything happens here, just outside Exeter. And we're supplying them some vehicle manufacturers, sort of some McLarens and Morgans and things, but mainly off-highway. So we're talking forklift trucks, material handling, golf carts, go-karts, electric bikes. Everything's going electric, as you know. Everything's going electric, or in the bigger end, it's going hybrid. Because bringing down engine, you can't, in quite a lot of big applications, you can't go fully electric yet. So they're downsizing engines and adding extra hybrid power, which all involves electric motors. So again, our electric motors business came from that Ford Transit, that hybrid Transit and Boris. Lightfoot is a similar but different story, in that, going back to that story again, our first customer from that grant was Islington Council in London. We supplied them 30 vehicles. And after a couple of months, they came back and said, it's not working. This technology is rubbish. We're not seeing any benefit. And that was a big problem for us, because we had 700 vehicles on order. The Department for Transport were funding it. And they said, hang on, you've got to fix this problem before we let you deliver anymore. And we looked at the problem. There was nothing wrong with the product, the vehicle, the technology. To cut a very long story short, we discovered that when you put a vehicle in the hands of White Van Man, it's very different to testing in lab conditions. So we found out the very, very expensive lesson that there's no such thing as an efficient vehicle without an efficient driver. A Range Rover is more efficient than a Toyota Prius if the Range Rover is driven well and the Prius is driven badly. It's common sense. It makes perfect sense now, but at the time it was a bit of a head scratcher. So because we had the problem, we had to fix the problem. We devised a device that plugs into the engine of our hybrid vehicle, feeds back to the driver in real time, makes them drive in the sweet spot, problem solved. So our hybrids then started performing, and we thought, hang on, much better idea. This little electronic device could be its own business. It was called EcoDrive at the time, not very adventurous. So we span it out into another business, called it Lightfoot, and the rest is history, and I'll tell you about it a bit more. Our home. So we've got these two businesses now, don't do hybrids. We sell electric motors globally. Lightfoot's mainly in the UK, just starting to go international a bit. Our home is Innovation Valley, which we're extremely proud of. We bought it a couple of years ago. We designed it all ourselves. It was an empty shell. It was on the side of the A38, past Exeter Racecourse, going towards Plymouth, around the Chudley area. It's brilliant. It's an amazing mix mash of Google, sort of moorland, vintage, rustic mess, really, an interior decorator's nightmare. But we love it, and we won Best Office Award last year, which we're very, very proud of. I've actually got a little bit of a video now. I hope. Hi there, and welcome to Innovation Valley, the home of Ashe Woods and Lightfoot. Ashe Woods occupy the downstairs. We'll give you a tour in a sec. Lightfoot occupy upstairs. Now, both businesses are at the forefront of clean tech engineering, where we're disrupting traditional markets, making vehicles cleaner, greener, and more efficient. Ashe Woods electric motors, making smaller, lighter, more efficient motors. Lightfoot, the Fitbit for cars, disrupting connected vehicle technology, connecting drivetrains to the internet, to the user, and enhancing usage behavior of these vehicles. We're changing the rules. We're small, but we're taking on the big boys. Okay, so I'm going to take you on a tour now. We'll start with Ashe Woods downstairs. Follow me. So here we are in the engineering office. This is where the magic happens. Say hello, everyone. And here's the R&D centre, where we test our motors on behalf of applications. All of our engineering is done in-house. We design the motors, we manufacture the prototypes, we take them into production, and we build them in volume and supply them to the end customer. Moving through into our production area now, where we do a combination. We do prototype manufacturing here, of course, where we're building and testing new methods and methodologies. We're also building small production runs by hand, and we're currently building our automated production line, which is going to be online later this year, which will be capable of building over 100,000 motors a year from the site here in Innovation Valley. So let's have a look at the Ashe Woods electric motor technology. I'm going to ask Jamie to run us through these two motors here.
So this is the old technology. This is AC induction, and this is our technology, IPM motor. We're a third of the weight, a third of the size, and actually we outperform this motor thermally, and we have a 25% increase in range for a given duty cycle on basically any application.
So we're saying it's smaller, it's lighter, it's better performance, and it's better looking than the competitors. So now we're moving through into the Lightfoot office, which is a bit funky. Lightfoot is all about connected vehicles. We develop the entire connected system for vehicles. We connect the drivetrain to the internet, to the user, to the fleet operator, whatever it may be. We develop the hardware, the firmware, the IT infrastructure, the web, the app. Absolutely all of it is designed and developed in-house by this great engineering team. So here's one of our products, Lightfoot, the Fitbit for cars. Plugs into the vehicle, listens to live engine data, feeds back to the driver to help them drive within the sweet spot. About 30,000 drivers in the UK on cars and vans, saving over 10% in fuel, up to 40% reduction in accidents. Really, really effective, really exciting. The drivers, if they hit elite driver standard each week, they get to win prizes and rewards. Things like Fitbits, cash, a year's supply of pies, supercar track days, weekends away, you name it. Really cool stuff. We're really, really good at gamifying data. So absolutely key
to our focus and to our success is our corporate culture. Staff here believe in what they're doing. They're here because they want to make a difference. We're making vehicles that are cleaner and greener and drivers who are more efficient. We're making technologies that are creating efficiencies and environmental and safety impact. It is so important. It's core to our beliefs and to our vision. We care. We focus a lot on marketing that out to the world. We want the world to know about these great technologies that are being developed here in the UK, but that have global significance and benefit.
Right, I'm conscious during that I cut from a presentation from me to a video of me, and which looks bad. I don't want to give the wrong impression, but we love where we work. We love what we do. We love where we work, and I thought I'd share that with you. Okay, let's move along. I probably actually, watching that video again, covered quite a lot of this. We're now going to talk about Lightfoot. Lightfoot is the world's first technology to reward better drivers. It's the Fitbit for cars. It does quite a lot. It changes driver behavior a little bit, and that little bit is a 10% reduction in fuel minimum, up to 60% reduction in accident rates, and up to 20% reduction in emissions from those vehicles. This is all data that's been validated by fleets, by insurers, by universities, and so on. It's really, really, really effective. We supply two different markets. We supply the business market, and we are just getting into the consumer market, where we're selling online and we're selling at Ashe Woods. We're not quite on Amazon yet. That's not strictly true, but we will be fairly soon. Our business, the Lightfoot business, has about 60 employees. We've got a bit more than that in the Ashe Woods one, but Lightfoot is 60. We raised funding last year from the Business Growth Fund, who are a very active UK investor in fast growth businesses. And investing alongside them was Martin McCourt, who was CEO of Dyson for 11 years. He is awesome. He took Dyson as CEO. He took Dyson from a one product, one country company to the global megastar that it is now. So we're hoping, he knows what it takes to take a real proud British engineering business from zero to hero. So we hope some of his experience will rub off on us. So how Lightfoot itself works, it's based on three core components, being the target, which is elite driver standard. We ask all of our drivers to hit elite driver standard. There's a lot of data and metrics behind that, which I won't go into now, but head for elite driver. The technology is the second element. The Fitbit for cars, the gadget. If I had another hand, I'd pull one out of my pocket. But it's a little gadget, plugs into the engine, feeds back to the driver in real time, helps them stay within the sweet spot where they are at their most efficient and smooth, ultimately, and that helps them become an elite driver. And then the final key ingredient is the rewards. It's all very well setting a target and providing a tool, telling you how to do the target, but there's got to be something in it for the driver. So we provide that range of rewards you saw on the video. Every week, elite drivers are winning hundreds of prizes. Outside of the vehicle, there's another relationship going on. Every driver has their app, obviously, which is effectively their driving CV. And on the app, they can look at their score. They can see historic, current score. They can compete in leagues, national leagues, local leagues. They can set up leagues with friends and family. They can also use it for useful features like vehicle health. They can see if there's a problem with the vehicle, which we diagnose for them. They can use it for business private mileage reporting and things like that. They can also, some drivers, if they're given access, can configure the sensitivity. They can decide how much feedback they want from Lightfoot. They can turn it all off if they want, but the more feedback they get, the better they score, the more they win. So, but the most important part of it, as I said, is the competitions page. That's where we get the most engagement. Hundreds of prizes every week. Drivers log on to the app, choose which competition to enter. They just then have to be an elite driver, and then they're in it to win it. Those prizes, you saw them on the video. By far the most popular one, and I heard it from the laughs, is the year's supply of pies, supplied by a local business, I'm delighted to say, but all sorts of other stuff, go-kart days, Fitbits, Amazons, all sorts of things. And we're now just launching, this month, we're launching the Drivers' Lottery. So not the national lottery, not the postcode lottery, but the same idea. Every week, loads and loads of cash prizes, from small ones, £2, £5, up to big ones, hundreds, thousands, one day millions, when we got enough users. And the point here is, if you are a safe and efficient driver, you're in the hat. You're in the hat to win the cash. Why wouldn't you? If you drive, if driving is part of your life, why wouldn't you want to monetize that? Why wouldn't you want to maybe get paid for it? Why wouldn't you want to save a bit of money from it? That's the route we're trying to go with this. And interestingly, although I've come a long way from selling raffle tickets to win supercars, sort of selling dreams for people to go off and live their fantasies of being a hooligan in a supercar. Now the other way, which is rewarding the total opposite behaviour for that with prizes and rewards. So there is a logic to it somewhere. What it all means, this is a sort of context slide really, to say for every 7 of these little devices that we get out there on the road, it's like taking one vehicle off the road altogether. Not physically, obviously, but from a emissions and fuel reduction point of view, 7 better drivers equals 1 less vehicle on the road. It's pretty big. And I know we all think we're great drivers. 80% of people think they're above average. You do the maths. But we can all get a little bit better. And it's not about being boring, it's just about being smooth. And the impact that has on fuel consumption and the emissions associated with it is enormous. Okay, I'll read this out and then I'll tell you what it's about. We don't need a few people being perfectly sustainable. We need millions of people doing it imperfectly. You've all read similar comments to this or quotes to this. It's not one of mine. But the point is, we thoroughly believe in this. For us, it's driving. It's great if you go out and buy a Tesla or an electric vehicle. Fantastic. But it's not going to shift the dial. It's not going to save the planet with a few people doing big things. What is millions of people getting up tomorrow, going out to the car that's already on the road, that's already been manufactured, that's already theirs, and driving it a tiny bit differently. You add that up over millions and millions of people, and that will shift the dial. That does change everything. And you haven't manufactured a new electric vehicle and all the emissions associated with that manufacturing process either. Get more out of what we've got is what we're trying to say. How am I doing for time? Because there's another little video here which doesn't include me. 10 minutes. Okay. So taking on that last point about getting people together to do little changes and little things to make a difference. We wanted to take that and prove it in a local area to a global audience. So we launched the Breathe initiative earlier this year, which is about the Exeter community getting behind this. Our aim was to get a 5,000 Lightfoot units on vehicles in the Exeter area to show what a community taking positive action, what impact that they can have on fuel emissions and safety and so on. So there's a quick intro video here.
To many of us, Exeter is the heart of Devon, home to stunning architecture, areas of outstanding natural beauty, and over 124,000 people. But like many other cities, it's vulnerable to air pollution. Traffic and congestion pollutes the air we all breathe and threatens our beautiful city. It's something all drivers contribute to daily. Breathe Exeter's aim is to make Exeter even cleaner, greener and safer by the end of 2019 by teaming up with the people that live and work here. By making very small adjustments to our driving behaviour, we can all make a big positive difference.
In round figures, I used to average about 400 miles out of a tank of fuel, and roughly now I'm getting 500 miles out of a tank of fuel. That's 25% extra, and all for just driving a little bit more sensibly. Lightfoot is there to make me a better driver personally, and in my experience, that's exactly what it has done.
Developed right here in Exeter and proven in businesses across the UK, Lightfoot is responsible for reducing tons of emissions every year. We know not everyone has the option to drive less, let alone stopping entirely, but a small change in driving behaviour can make an enormous difference. To put this into perspective, if 10% of all vehicles in Exeter were fitted with Lightfoot, that would be the equivalent of taking nearly 1,000 vehicles off our roads. By concentrating our effort on a single city, we can bring huge benefits locally. It's a way to make a significant difference to Exeter's air quality for all of us. And you can be involved in conserving Exeter now and for future generations.
I've got 3 children and we live locally, and actually the legacy that I think our generation leaves behind needs to be a really positive one when it comes to the environment. Without a doubt, individuals can make a difference. We can all play our part.
We're looking after our future generations of our families, our kids and our grandkids, and I think that we need to work together to make that happen.
Having something like this where we've got a clear goal will be hugely helpful. It's the right thing to do.
I think we've created something really special here in Exeter as a city together, and there's no point creating something that you don't protect.
Together we can make a huge difference.
Join Breathe Exeter now.
Be part of the movement.
Breathe Exeter.
We need you.
Join the movement and find out how you can be involved. Breathe Exeter. We need you.
Okay, so that's our initiative, launched a few months ago. We've got about 1,000 of the 5,000, so it's good, but we need more. I absolutely promised I am not here on any kind of sales pitch, sales mission. However, while I'm here, I would just say anyone who does want to get involved in Breathe Exeter, get a Lightfoot device. You can buy them online on our website. I've got vouchers on me. If anyone does want, if anyone is interested, I can give them one of those, which will give it a further discount from the already discounted Breathe Exeter price. So sales pitch over, but don't feel forced, but feel free. Oops, I've forgotten that. So I mean, this is just again 25 vehicles in Exeter reduces X amount of CO2, equivalent to X trees, equivalent to X vehicles off the road. It's simple maths. The more we do, the more we save, the better things get. And driving to Lightfoot isn't very difficult. It's just like driving. It's like imagine driving always conscious. We all drive for hours not thinking about the fact that we're driving. You sort of look back and go, God, what the hell happened in the last 10 minutes? Lightfoot's just about being conscious while you drive. And it's very small change. It's not hard to do, but it makes a massive difference. And also, I'm getting carried away now, but in the box comes a sticker. The sticker, the way I see the sticker symbolises a badge of honour to put on the back of the car to say, look, I care about the impact of the motoring that I do, that I have to do because it's part of my life and my job and I have to do it, but I do care enough to try to make a difference and to minimise it and to do it as effectively and efficiently as possible. Right, can Exeter become a world leader in air quality? Of course we can. We already are, and we have to. We're the home of the Met Office. I mean, what better city in the country to be a global leader than the one that's the? It just makes sense. And also, Exeter City Council. I don't pretend to know everything about what goes on in the public sector side of things, but I've worked with a lot of councils over the years, and I've been working really closely with Exeter City Council recently, and I've been really impressed by several things. One is, they've made this, the senior leadership have made a declaration on their zero carbon by 2030, and they've committed to working with the almost 4,000 businesses in the Exeter area to get together, to do it together, which I think is great. I mean, there are other places doing it, but it's great that we're leading from a council point of view. And the other bit is just their attitude. They've just launched a commercial team. And the commercial team is focused on working with businesses to create revenue for Exeter City Council to fund the gap that there is from central government. And I think that's great that they're taking that initiative and getting commercial. They're looking to work with businesses to make money for the business and for themselves, but also they've got a real focus on working with businesses or creating money-making initiatives that are emission reduction focused as well. So they're combining environment with financial, which is great. So really, I think it's really impressive. I think we've got everything we need to be this world leader, which leads on to the final slide. This can we be a world leader appears a lot. I really think we can. In my world, our businesses are doing disruptive things. No one else in the world is doing what we are doing in our small world of our businesses. That makes us a global leader in emission reduction without question, and we're in Exeter. So those two things are a pretty good start in my little world, for being a global leader. But what more can we do? And my question that I was asked to put out was about what more can we do, basically, and to give a bit of context to that, I'd like us to think about what changes we could make, small changes we could make as individuals, maybe businesses, but probably even better individuals. What are habits, day-to-day activities that are bad, and with a small tweak could be a tiny bit better, but not totally disrupt our lives? What are they? And when multiplied up by gazillions of people, could be transformative. In our world, it's driving. Everyone drives. Drive a tiny bit better, massive impact once scaled up globally. What else is there? It doesn't have to be region specific. It can be any kind of habit. I think the point is the people in this room are able to develop any kind of innovation, any kind of technology to do anything. If we can find the problem and come up with a clever way of tweaking it and fixing it, then we can develop the solution on how to do it. We can trial it locally. We can get global eyes on it, and then we can scale it out. So it has to be, but my question is, what day-to-day things are there that could be done more efficiently that we could perhaps devise a way of influencing. Does that make sense? Okay, good. As I say, we've got everything we need here to deliver that solution. Thank you very much for listening. Any questions, or is that not my job? No.
First of all, big thank you there to Mark. Thank you. Mark will take questions at the end of the next session. And the question that Mark posed is going to come back to haunt you about 10:10. So just remember it, and we will put it up on the side. But just one more thing before Mark leaves the stage. He gave this presentation to the ExIST steering group about 2 months ago. I am an elite driver. But more interestingly, I drove to Scotland the other day. I drive a nasty big V6 4x4. Usually does about 280 miles on a tank. I did 420. That's a 50%. Routinely, about 20% plus. So it does make a huge difference. I think that's something to be proud of. Thank you. So Mark, if it... Now I want to welcome to the stage Dr. Mark Hort. Or Matt Hort. Sorry, Matt. Matt leads the atmospheric dispersion and air quality teams doing the research into those subjects at the Met Office. So Matt, if I can welcome you to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. You wouldn't know that we'd known each other for about 10 years. Good morning, everyone. So, slight change here. So, I lead a group at the Met Office. It's a research team at the Met Office with the title of Atmospheric Dispersion and Air Quality. This sits within the Science Directorate of the Met Office, so we're very much ingrained in how we can develop the science and applications to actually deliver services. And I'll talk around a range of those things. We've just heard about industry solutions. This is really going to be a slightly different type of talk, but hopefully one you'll see the linkages to if I don't make them explicitly. So we all know where the Met Office is. We're in a Met Office building, and the Met Office is just over the motorway. But what a lot of people won't realise, they'll think of weather, they'll think of climate, and a range of other things. They won't have really much of an idea of just the simple range of things that we get up to. And the Atmospheric Dispersion and Air Quality team is one of those areas, I think. So I have a slide here that just shows a few of the various areas that we are involved in. So volcanic ash. People will remember the Icelandic eruption. We are an international centre for volcanic ash forecasting, and my team developed the models and the science that goes into that. Nuclear accidents. People will remember the Fukushima nuclear accident, perhaps. Well, the Chernobyl nuclear accident stimulated the UK government to start an atmospheric dispersion team in the Met Office. And that started our path to developing the models we now use for predicting these things, understanding these events, and also for forecasting and understanding air quality. We also get involved in a range of other things to do with biological, agricultural pests. So foot and mouth disease, which affected the southwest an awful lot, blue tongue disease, and a range of other things as well that I will talk briefly about as we go forward, as well as industrial accidents and air quality, which is the topic we're here to discuss. All this comes out of a research team that is only 22 people in size. So we're not vast. We have collaborations across the whole of the UK and internationally. We work with universities, industry, people like Rolls-Royce jet engines, for aircraft impacts, Public Health England and Health People for human health impacts, Agricultural Rothamsted, the Pirbright Institute, which is the equivalent of Rothamsted for animal health, for the biological and agricultural sector that we work in, and we're often supporting those areas. And we do it across a range of things from consultancy, operations and research. And by operations here I mean 24/7 services that come out of the Met Office and other institutions. So we do have a 24/7 capability. And our role is, as I see it, is we're very much, all of these areas that I've talked about are about impacts. It's about a change. We've just had a talk about impacts, impacting your fuel economy, your emissions from taking action. And we, as the dispersion team in the Met Office, are in the middle of this spectrum from left to right. We use a lot of data, from weather data through to observations of the environment, through to information about what's being emitted, so what's coming out of a car exhaust, what's coming out of a nuclear accident when it's broken, or what's being emitted by a volcano when it erupts. So we need to work with a lot of people there, but then we sit in the middle and then link with downstream. We have to understand left and right in this diagram for us to be able to actually make that work. And it's really about impacts. If what we're doing isn't helping somebody make a decision, make a change, take action, then what we're doing actually is possibly a waste of time. There are scientists in my organisation and in other organisations that will just want to do the science for the science sake, but that's not what we're there to do. We're actually there to do, and our remit is to make an impact and improve things. So, get back a few more pretty pictures just to make the point. So here we have some images of oil fires from one of the Gulf Wars. I can't remember which one, I'm afraid. There's smoke there also from the Grenfell Tower fire, which is a tragedy, obviously, on so many levels. But actually, people won't be aware. A lot of questions about the quality of air in the surrounding area, the impact of things like asbestos and these sorts of things on people that weren't actually in the tower itself, but in the surrounding area. And then underneath that is a picture of the Fukushima nuclear power station during the accident. So you can see there a range of scales. We're talking thousands of kilometres to maybe only a few hundred metres. And this is one of the real challenges we face. Now, at the top of the slide, plant diseases, animal diseases. We have pictures here of a fungus infecting corn, or wheat actually, sorry, wheat crops. We have insects. We actually try to model how insects fly in the atmosphere. They're affected by the meteorology. There are limits. We can't do birds, because birds pretty much make up their own mind where they go. But we are working with people at Exeter University on flight of birds and migratory patterns and how changes in the weather might affect the migratory pattern. But this is more about how insects might move and cause infection. These are particularly midges. Pollen, spores, be it for hay fever or for plant diseases spreading from one crop to another crop, and smoke from biomass burning from wildfires. And again, so you're dealing with a natural environment here, you're dealing with biological sciences, and a range of other disciplines. Volcanoes, you know, very nice, lovely pictures. Everyone loves a volcano, or lots of people love a volcano perhaps. They're a great tourist attraction. What people don't realise is the eruption that happened in 2010 that caused so much disruption. For about a month before, it had been a fantastic tourist attraction, because there'd been some lava spewing out, you know, very picturesque. Tourists were traipsing up into the middle of Iceland and having their pictures taken, and then it all went slightly wrong, and the eruption took off, and we had all the disruption driven by a lack of understanding about the potential impacts of volcanic ash, which is misnamed terribly, which is actually rock, but volcanic ash impacting upon jet engines, and what that does to you when you bring basically tiny bits of rock, shards of rock, into a jet engine that's spinning around at 1,000 revolutions per minute and possibly at 2,000 degrees Celsius. These shards of rock start to impact on surfaces, melt, clog up engines, which is what the problem arises. But you know, it's we now know a lot more about how to do that and forecasting. But volcanoes also give off gas, and in 2013 there was an eruption that most people won't be aware of, which emitted a whole lot of sulfur dioxide. So in 5 months, this one volcano emitted the same amount of sulfur dioxide as all of Europe from man-made emissions, and that has a huge impact upon air quality as well as the environment potentially. Agriculture. And air quality. And air quality is driven by both cars, as we've heard, but also agricultural practices. So there's a picture there of muck spreading. That releases ammonia. Ammonia reacts in the atmosphere and can create particulate matter. And we've all heard of particulate matter, or PM, as affecting our air quality. And so there's a lot of implications here and a lot of different scales that we're talking about, and a lot of different disciplines that we have to work with, and a lot of opportunities therefore to increase our understanding and work with industry and others to actually try and tackle some of these different aspects. So what is atmospheric dispersion? Perhaps briefly, we emit chemicals, particulates into the atmosphere. They are blown by the winds, put it simply. They interact with, if they're chemicals, can interact with the sun and react with other chemicals. If they encounter rain or meteorological clouds, they can be removed from the atmosphere or go through different chemical reactions, because the presence of water can stimulate those chemical reactions. They settle on the surface, potentially causing damage to ecosystems. And whilst they're in the atmosphere, we can all breathe them in, and as we're all aware, that can obviously cause damage to us. It's quite complicated. It's highly three-dimensional. It's highly changing in time. You know, if the emission comes out and encounters a rain cloud, and that rain cloud is raining and dumps it on the floor, it's no longer in the atmosphere for us to read. If that rain is 50 kilometers away, then it's still in the atmosphere and we can still breathe it. So there's a lot of time dependency here. The morning rush hour, how does that coincide with what the atmosphere is doing? On, you know, on a stable day where things are nice and cold, it might keep it near the surface. We've probably all experienced those days where we get poor air quality like that. On a nice sunny afternoon where the sun's heated the ground and there's a lot of thermals going on, that spreads the pollution out, lowers therefore the amount, the concentration, and therefore improves the air quality. So timing is important, and therefore our human practices and the physical environment and how they interact is a vital role in understanding the science and how we might mitigate the impact of air quality. As well as this, we use measurements a lot, as well as doing modelling. So a few examples here. On the left, got a couple of examples of air quality monitoring stations. There's one there outside the Ram in Exeter. You can just see it behind a person's head, perhaps. It's rather a small station, only measures a couple of different species. The big green box just underneath it is a bigger site that measures a lot of species. Exeter doesn't have one of those. We actually measure very few of our air pollutants in and around Exeter. And this is a typical. In the middle, we have the Met Office Civil Contingencies aircraft, which I'll talk about in a minute. So we take aircraft measurements. Underneath, a satellite image. That's actually a satellite image of sulfur dioxide from an eruption that happened in the Kurils, which is just between Russia and Japan, the Kuril Islands, happened last week. So that's a real satellite image from last week as that sulfur dioxide moved around the outside. On the right is a LiDAR, which is a laser-based product, a laser device that sits on the ground, shines a laser and measures the reflectivity back from particulates in the atmosphere and can tell you information about that. Those are all existing measurements and products and things like this, but we also have some things coming along in the future. So there's a lot of new satellites being launched. Great capability, much higher resolution, much larger data volumes, so it's a real big data problem, and greater capability, but also small sensors. I mean, things like Lightfoot potentially providing information on drivers, you know, real-time information. It doesn't have to be a direct measurement of a chemical species or the temperature or things. It could be a measurement of people activity, which you could relate to something that emits pollution, and then you might be able to use that. It could be temperature sensors in cars. We all have a little temperature gauge in our cars that tells us what the outside temperature is. We don't get those to tell us what the temperature is, to verify our models. How can we access that? Google Traffic. There's a whole range of potential opportunistic or cheap data that is a challenge for the science community to try and use because we don't quite understand it. We don't understand the quality. We like expensive bits of kit that have been tested, validated, stuck somewhere, you know, signed off by about 20 different people, and then we really get on with it. But a lot of this new technology that is providing vast, really big data is less well characterized, and how we can deal with that and actually make use of it to better serve society is a real challenge. So moving on. Specifically on air quality. So UK air quality, so people might not know these acronyms. COMIAP is the Committee for the Medical Effects of Air Pollution. It's an expert advisory group for the Department of Health. And Public Health England is the, if you like, technical agency that supports the Department of Health within England. These are statements from them about the effects of air quality. I won't read them out. Underneath there are pictures of UK cities that in a WHO report, that's a World Health Organization report, that the World Health Organization stated were exceeding particulate matter limits that the World Health Organization would state. Now, WHO have more stringent criteria than is currently imposed in the UK or in Europe for particulate matter. So they listed, I think, about 37 UK cities and towns. And the reason for the pictures is to show they're not all Scunthorpe. They're not all Port Talbots. They are very leafy, green, you know, river-based market towns that people may not think of having a particular air quality problem, but these are diverse, and they're everything from market towns up to London. And the government has stated that a lot of the ambition is to meet the WHO targets, but it expects not to be able to with current progress for a range of reasons. And so there's a real challenge there, how we can address that. And to try and address that, the government released a clean air strategy, and I won't go into that, but that was released early this year, and that has a range of goals within it. So very quickly, so pollutants. We have a range of pollutants. I will skip this actually in the interest of time, but the primary ones of real interest in the UK are particulate matter, PM, and the number just reflects the size in microns, and ozone and NO2 for traffic. Ammonia in the middle, NH3, is important because agriculture emits this, and it actually reacts in the atmosphere to form particulate matter. So the impact on health is through the particulate matter, but the original source, actually, a lot of the problem comes from ammonia. How does the Met Office get involved in this? Well, we deliver an air quality forecast, and that forecast takes in emissions data. It uses weather prediction data. It takes it into another model, and it does the chemical reactions, the physical processes, and produces a forecast. We also use observations, both to judge and tell us whether our model's doing a good job, but also to improve our forecast. So this is a fusion of observations with the model to try and better do this. So here's an example of a forecast. This is last week. The UK is green, which is good. Our air quality wasn't too bad last week, but with the heat we had in the European continent, this is just ozone. I'm just showing here, you can see how the ozone is picking up over France quite substantially. And we would have issued warnings of very high pollution if we'd been experiencing those levels in the UK last week. We produce that, a 5-day forecast. We also can produce these traces here where we're looking at a specific location, individual locations or groups of locations, and comparing against observations, but also then producing the forecast into the future. And it's this sort of information that goes out via our website and goes to DEFRA and others in providing the national forecast. Emissions are vitally important. Not my area. I originally was an engineer, but it's not what I do now. But they are the main input into the models. You know, what's coming out of cars, what's coming out of farms, what's coming out of industry. How those are represented in the model, or how that's reported and the amount of data available, is we're provided through a national emissions inventory monthly figures for car emissions. Monthly. But I've just told you that it depends whether it's in the morning, it's at night, it's in the middle of the day. Time is really important. So we have to disaggregate that and recreate a highly temporally varying process. And that applies to not just cars, it applies to whether we're at school, whether we go to work, is industry working or not working, is it, weekend, are we burning wood at home in our wood fires at the weekend or in the evenings, what are farmers doing? So a lot of temporal information here, and there's a lot of scope there, I think, for industry to help us with that temporal information and gather that and understand how to deal with it, as I said earlier. Observations. Talk briefly about those, but what we have here, this is a map of the UK's national network. It's called AURN, Automatic Urban and Rural Network, is what it stands for. It's run by DEFRA. There are other sites run by local authorities and the Environment Agency, things, but this is a national network, and it's the backbone of the UK's air quality monitoring capability. The graph in the middle is a plot. The red line, if I remember correctly, is the verification of my model, of the Met Office model. The yellow line is, a European ensemble. So this is multiple models running multiple European countries, and we aggregate the data together and create what we call an ensemble. So it's a mean of their results, if you like. We take the observations and we compare the model, and we then do some processing. So what we actually, forecast is the orange line that you can now see. Now this graph is showing a bias, and so being on that line, that zero line, is better. And so we've used yesterday's observations and yesterday's model to understand how the model is performing. And then when we do a forecast, we fuse those and we correct our forecast, assuming that the performance yesterday is a fairly good indication of just how bad we're going to do the next day. And as you can see here, we have a big improvement. This is just using those 150 sites. And actually, most of those sites only measure a few species. As I said, the Exeter site only actually measures 2 species, I think. So actually, most individual chemical species that we're trying to measure for health effects have no more than 50 sites over the whole of the UK. For rainfall, the UK has 3,000 measurement sites. So for air quality, most of the time we're dealing with 50. There's a real lack of data to be able to provide robust information. And the challenges, things like representativity, that site in Exeter, it's on that road. That doesn't tell you what the air quality is, even on the high street, let alone where I live in St Thomas, or whether we're in St Leonard's, or whether we're here. You know, we all know that pollution is related to individual sources as well as distributed things, and so understanding that is really important. That's sort of scene setting. That's what we do. This is something else that Met Office is doing, but it's a national programme. So the UKRI, which is the UK's research institute, so this is NERC, EPSRC, which people may have heard. These are the research councils that tend to fund research activities within the university. Under its new leadership, has devised a programme called the Strategic Priorities Fund, where they are looking for government agencies and the UK academic community to work more closely together, and providing funding that goes to both sides of that divide. You might not be aware, but funding for the UK Research Institute is not accessible to most government agencies, and so there's, that can prove challenging if you're trying to actually pull science into providing services that help society. So this programme was specifically devised for that, and one of the successful projects underneath it was called Clean Air, which is an air quality project, and the Met Office, along with NERC, the Natural Environment Research Council, the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, the Medical Research Council, and Innovate UK, and one other research council, I'm afraid I can't remember right now, all teamed up and to do a project on clean air. They're all the logos, so if you understand what ESRC is, I can't read it from here, that's the one I forgot. This is the goal. It's very much focused on multidisciplinary science and improving air quality through multidisciplinary science. That's the key, I think, take-home message as far as I'm concerned. You know, we can all do our own little bit. I could be a chemist and I can do my chemistry really well. I can be an atmospheric scientist and do that. I can be in industry and do something. But actually, air quality involves all of these areas and a whole lot of social science. We've just heard about people changing their behaviours, taking action. How can my science be communicated to them so they can understand what action to take? How can it be communicated into industry so industry can understand what action to take, or, you know, both to improve society but also maybe to get benefit? There's nothing wrong with being a commercial benefit and improving the environment simultaneously. You know, it's classic win-win. So there are identified within this 4 challenges. So modelling is still seen as a real challenge. We really struggle to model local air quality. We can do large-scale air quality, but what I'm exposed to stood in this building, what a colleague over at the Met Office on the other side of the motorway is exposed to, are very different things. And modelling at that sort of scale is really challenging. Measurements is really challenging as well. Linking all this together is challenging, so the joints between the different components. And then how you pull that into policy and other such things. Some examples of work that we're doing, though, underneath this already, and this is just getting going, and actually there will be some funding calls going out over July and August related to this. But we have projects that involve new measurements, so we're going to use the Met Office aircraft, the civil contingency aircraft, this little propeller aircraft. We've built some new instruments, so underneath here you can see this is what we bought from the commercial provider. And then we ripped it apart and made it into this, which basically has got a lot more kit inside, a much smaller box, because it's going in a small aircraft, so that's important. So we have real engineering excellence going on there. And this plane will then fly every week for 12 months. Because one of the big things is actually regular sampling to get the different conditions, get different behaviours, get different activities. There's lots of research campaigns that last a month, but this is going to fly every week for a month. We're also then looking at trying to improve the resolution of the model. How can we get more representative? Not just to improve the models just for the sake of it, but how can they represent what we are each individually exposed to better? And can we test that? So we have an observation challenge there as well. emissions, I've talked quite a lot about those. There's going to be a big project on how to actually try and better improve our understanding of emissions and categorization of emissions and do that. And also working with the medical people to medical studies, one of the main challenges is we're all different. We all do different things. You know, even if I have a twin, our diets will be different, our physical activity will be different. And you know, and therefore actually understanding what the effects of air quality are on each on a human is really challenging, and long data sets is key. This is why they tend to follow segments of the population for their life. You hear about these studies where they follow from birth to retirement type thing. And so we're trying to extend our data, atmospheric data, which often is very much confined to the last few years, because we're always getting we're getting better, and we don't like to look back too far because we weren't very good back then. It is key, and so we've been looking at that and making this. It's a rather flippant use of a cloud there, but making this cloud-based, so actually expose the data so it is more accessible, more discoverable, and people can actually then be stimulated and interact with it, and it's not just kept in the hallowed halls of research, but it's actually usable and openly usable. And discoverable by people who have clever ideas and may be able to make better use of it than I or others can. So that is what we do at the Met Office. We are very much a global player in this, and we try to link up with across the UK hugely, and the SPF Clean Air programme is totally UK air quality focused. There is no global dimension to that. That is UK wanting UK partners. And that's a specific focus. So we were invited to think about a question to ask the group in relation to this, and in relation to the subject of the morning, which is, can Exeter be great? And I would agree that, yes, I think it can be. I think we already have greatness here in Exeter, in this area. And I was posed a question. I had to write it down because I only thought of it yesterday. It's really... It's similar to the earlier question, but I come at it from a science and a data perspective. So I was thinking about how can we use data to drive social action? I don't think scientists will solve the problem. Scientists can provide the evidence, the information that allows society to solve the problems. And so how can we make our data, or what data might be useful for society to make those changes? I'd like us to think on that if possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matt. Righto, if I can invite Mark to come back up and then open it for questions. You've all done very well on timing, by the way, so thank you very much for that. First question, and I can see Gabriel has stuck his hand up there. There is a microphone on its way to you, Gabriel.
Hi, good morning. Gabriel from SunGift Energy. Question for you, Mark. We've been using your technology for a while and absolutely think it's brilliant. It's had a great effect on our vans. And the reason we currently don't use it on our cars is most of our cars are already electric or hybrid. And we feel that the driving behaviour has already been sort of changed because of some of the information those vehicles give and the way those electric vehicles drive. And I was just wondering your kind of view on what Lightfoot, how it's going to work with the transition to electric vehicles. Have you got plans to make it work and be interesting to the electric vehicle drivers as well?
Okay, thank you. Good question. So we do a lot on hybrid vehicles because I think, you know, incrementally, exactly what you're saying, it makes sense on petrol, diesel, makes sense on hybrid, maybe slightly less so electric, less so more, especially the return on investment side of things, because electricity is cheap, fuel is more expensive. But there is the range anxiety. I take your point that some of that behavior is changed by what's in those vehicles. But there's still more that could be done. Smoother, efficient driving is all the more important psychologically to deal with the electric, you know, the electric vehicle takeover, because, you know, the fear of running out of battery is almost a bigger concern than the cost of buying more fuel. So that's kind of one point, but I do take your point. Yes, people do drive them because of that fear. They do drive them a bit better. The future for us is around the gamification, to be honest. The hardware is great, and it's going to be around for years, our Lightfoot hardware. But it's a means to an end. It's the gamification, the rewards, the benefits that is the long termer. So we look in the connected vehicles of the future, we look to be an integrated Apple CarPlay app, if you like, that you turn on, pay your monthly subscription, then you're in the driver's lottery. So that barrier to entry, which is having to buy the hardware, will go away. So that's kind of one answer. And just very quickly on the other, the really interesting one, which I would like to get help from this room on, is we have got gazillions of miles of data on how good humans drive and how bad humans drive, because we test the device first with it off and then we turn it on. And so we've got good and bad human driving. That is got to be unbelievably valuable for the autonomous vehicle revolution, because the biggest challenge to autonomous vehicles is people. And, you know, self-driven cars are brilliant. They're ready already. The humans that are already on the road, they're the problem. So there's got to be a link there. And, you know, there'll be lots of people with good ideas.
Any other questions? Across at the back there. And I'll come to you in a moment. Or we'll do it the other way round.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Suzanne Walford from Fit Anstey. You mentioned the very first slide about changing people's behaviour just little by little, and I think this is probably more a question for Matt, actually. I've been doing a lot of work with the Urban Mobility Partnership about how we can change people's behaviour. The default position that we all have is private motor car first as opposed to any other form of transport, and how do we shift that so people think, could I take the bus, the train, the bike, walk, whatever it might be, and only as a last resort use the private motor car. But there is an issue, of course, that actually if you don't use the car and you're walking or cycling, you're on a street breathing in a lot of air pollution, so it's probably arguably more healthy to be sat in a car. Or is it more healthy to be walking and cycling and breathing in all the air pollution? How do you think we transition into encouraging people to be more active, be more sustainable in the way they move around and travel, with this overarching air pollution issue? And similarly around the sort of school drop-off point about schools in London.
Outweigh it, so it's better to run. Yes, if you ran in a less polluted time, then that would be even better. But if it means you skip your run entirely for the day, that's worse. So you should just carry on if you can't rearrange it for a better time of day. So I think there's understanding where the pollution is a key thing. You know, and if you're a child, you're a small person, pollution is worse than if you're a tall person. So I'm better off than most people in this room because you're closer to the source of the pollution, and pollution decreases very rapidly as you move away. Walking down back streets, cutting across a park rather than sticking to the main road. All these things are things that can really make a difference. But providing information and getting our models, or being able to present it, map it, display it, make it interactive, you know, gamify it in some way, you know, that allows people to see that, I think is a key thing that we're missing at the moment entirely. And so bridging that is a vital aspect to it. I think I'll stop at that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, we had one more question over here, and time again to include Chris as well. So thanks as well.
Oh yeah, Mick Green from Endorse HR. A comment on your question that you gave us, and that is around communication. Some people are driven by data, but most people are driven by their emotions and motivation. And I think one of the key challenges for everything we're talking about today is how do we turn that data, all the science, into language that people will be willing and motivated to engage with. And I think that is the key challenge. And I've got one further comment, which is a question on the Lightfoot side. How many pies is a year's supply of pies?
I agree with your comment on the engagement. I mean, getting social sciences and understanding how we do that is something that, from a physical scientist perspective, we need to be much better at.
Pies. Before I do pies, I agree as well, but I think interestingly the two people here are perfect for that. We gamify data, you create data, and it's exactly that. I totally agree. If the data is the power, if we can make people understand it in a simple way and reward them for doing the right change, yeah, brilliant. Pies, a pie a week for a year.
What a week? Really? That's not your supply.
I'm sorry.
Good question.
Not the questions I was expecting.
Important things, you know. Yeah. Chris.
Hi, Chris Lorham of South West Growth Service. Funnily enough, actually, I won the year's supply of pies, actually, and, which explains a few things about my waist size, but they were delicious, so thank you. And Lightfoot is fantastic. The question I've got to ask is about the challenge for Exeter to be world-class and the world best in air quality. And my thoughts are that it's going to be very tricky to achieve that, very tricky target, unless there's significant policy changes and real illegal enactment to not just change behaviours, but actually force people to change behaviours. And I'm particularly thinking, obviously, about avoiding traffic coming into Exeter, maybe changing the times and of when schools and so on run, and maybe making it more likely and more positive for people to use co-working spaces and avoid travelling at all if they can do, and encourage much better connectivity in the city, so that actually we don't have to go to hubs to work. We can actually work from home quite adequately using broadband and so on. And I'd be interested in all of your views on that, whether the changes that we want to see can happen without some policy behind it.
Shall I start? First of all, from an ExIST perspective, I think, Chris, you're quite right. It takes brave politicians and councils with a will to make a difference, and the bravery to actually commit to doing things differently. So we get the politicians we elect, and what we've got to think about is, if we want to make a difference, and Exeter's a good size of city with which to experiment in these things. It's 140,000 people. It's got enough traffic for it to be an issue. We've got good research institutes to actually be able to assess what the impacts of changes made are. And I think there's a lot of organisations around the world would be really interested in seeing city-scale experiments done. And I think they would provide financial backing to that. That's my view.
So I think it will take all three aspects, perhaps. So individual action, corporate action, and policy decisions to do it. We see quite a lot of traction in some cities like London, where there has been a political will and they've instigated things. But a lot of those actions, I get quite frustrated because I go to a lot of meetings in London. But the fact that they're not really scalable for a city like Exeter. And I think demonstrations of this sort of size of city, 100,000, is actually what is really key. And policies that will work for these types of cities like Exeter around the country to improve their quality for a much larger section of society is key. But we will need everything from carrot to stick, I think, yes.
Yeah, I don't think I've got much to add, really. Policy change, absolutely, but it takes too long. Of course it does. You know, when you're trying to do anything with government, it's the next meeting is in a month's time. And you just think, you know, we haven't got time. We definitely haven't got time to wait for it all to be policy change, because, you know, it's just taking too long. So we have to find a way of incentivizing people to do the right thing, because doing the right thing isn't always that difficult. We need to be aware of it, and the data provides that. We need to make people understand it in an easy way, and to identify why it's worthwhile for them to do it. Saying if you do this, you'll save the planet long term is not enough. It needs to be much closer to, nearer, tangible and visible, a bit more of I mean, I'm biased, but a bit more of a gamified approach, a bit more reward, a bit more live feedback, I guess. But yeah, needs everything.
Righto, thank you very much. I'm afraid we're out of time for further questions. Sorry, Carl. But what I would like you to do now, on your tables, you should find a piece of paper like this, and it has a copy of the 3 questions that have been posed. I'd like you to focus on the bottom 2 posed by our speakers. And as a table, I'd like you to stick down, whether it's on post-its, whether it's just noted down, what your thoughts are about that. We won't publish it now, but we will publish it after the event. Thank you very much.
So it isn't so kind of raised in the public's mindset. But as you can see, there are some pretty impressive statistics, impressive in a negative sense there, around the number of deaths from lung cancer, for example. 29% every year are attributed to air quality. when you bear in mind the kind of profile that smoking has, for example, some of those will be linked with that because of the indoor air pollution as a result of smoking, but it also comes from other forms of air pollution. Stroke. Hadn't really thought about stroke-related deaths being linked to air pollution, but actually the fact that particulate matter can permeate blood cells, blood vessels, it can permeate the lungs, it can permeate into the brain. Those sorts of things cause significant health impact. So, the World Health Organization have air quality guideline values, which are shown there, and as Matt said, different countries adhere to those in different ways through their policies. But essentially, for particulate matter 2.5, they recommend that people shouldn't have exposure of greater than 10 micrograms per metre squared. Now, there's some statistics that they also have there about over 80% of urban residents are exposed to air pollution levels that exceed the World Health Organization's limits. Now, you might think, well, where do all these data sets come from? How do they generate all of this? And it turns out that Exeter plays a pretty significant role in that. So the head of maths at the University of Exeter, a chap called Professor Gavin Shaddock, leads the data integration task force for the World Health Organization. He's a member of COMIAP, which Matt mentioned earlier. And he plays a significant role alongside other international experts in making sure that we can generate the information that is used by the WHO to both influence international policy but also local government policy. So I'll talk a little bit about how he goes about doing that. Now, we refer to environmental intelligence. Part of what we're trying to do at the university is to understand how we might be able to take the environmental research that people use and turn that into actionable intelligence that businesses, governments can take action from, that they can actually say, this has informed the way that we behave. In order to do that, they're looking at a variety of data sources and to generate this information. So Matt showed us some slides with UK ground monitoring stations on. This map shows you ground monitoring stations of air quality across the whole world. And one of the things that becomes really evident really quickly is that there's a lot of the world that doesn't have any coverage from a ground monitoring perspective. The vast majority of Africa, vast majority of South America, decent portions of Asia, no ground monitoring of air quality. So how do you, bearing in mind that those regions actually have a huge population, how do you make a sensible assessment of what the population exposure is to poor air quality? So, what the Data Integration Task Force that Professor Shaddock leads does is look at how to combine lots of different data sets and lots of different types of information to come up with something that gives a reasonable assessment of global coverage. So the first thing is this kind of ground monitoring. They also look at satellite-based estimates, and again, as Matt said, that sort of information is improving significantly with time, that new satellites, new mechanisms by which to assess air quality through satellites. Chemical transport models, atmospheric dispersion models, the sorts of things that Matt and the Met Office take a significant role in developing. Understanding topography, land use. So we also mentioned in some of the other talks that we all think about urban transport as being a significant contributor. It's less obvious to people that agriculture also is a significant contributor to air quality issues. And then, in order to understand what population exposure you have, you obviously have to consider population. Now, those things are very different types of data set. They come in varying quality. They're all in different types. They have a different standard. They have different uncertainties associated with them. And so what this Data Integration Task Force do, take those various data sets and they clean them. They try and make them so that they're consistent and can be combined in a sensible way. And then they apply statistical methods, Bayesian hierarchical framework, and I always find Bayesian very difficult to say. But they apply that to come up with the Data Integration Model for Air Quality, DMAC. That's the World Health Organization's model for creating the statistics that we've talked about a moment ago. That map there shows what they believe to be annual PM 2.5 across the world. And you can see, actually, some of the most significant areas, Africa, are the areas where there were really very few ground monitoring systems. Now, What they then do is apply the population statistics, and they look at whether on a grid cell basis, so a grid cell is about 10 kilometres by 10 kilometres, so it's not very granular. And when we've discussed the fact that actually it can vary significantly from this side of the motorway to the other side, there's still a lot of work to be done, but it's better than the ground monitoring stations that we saw in the first diagram. They look at a grid cell and they look at what is the average population in that grid cell, and they make an assessment of how much of the population as a consequence of that is exposed to particulate matter exposure beyond what the WHO think is appropriate. Now, they can then use that to understand what is the likely exposure and what is the likely attributable health burden on a grid cell basis, and they can extrapolate that up to be country based. And you can see that one of the other issues is that it's really not a very fair distribution. It's not connected directly to population. If you have a highly populated country, you don't necessarily have the most significant impact. Actually, what you see is that there are far more significant impacts from air pollution in many of the developing world countries than there are in developed world. And in part, that can be due to different approaches. So burning wood fires in houses in order to create fuel for cooking is much more prevalent within developing world than it is in developed world. But it's also down to things like transboundary air pollution. So it's about the fact that the source of the pollutant, as Matt's described with the physical processes, the source of the air pollution is not necessarily exactly where that air pollution will be felt in some cases. So, for example, Hong Kong has historically suffered significantly from the fact that China has a lot of industrial activity just north of its borders. So, on a country-by-country basis, this map shows what are called disability-adjusted life years attributable to air pollution. So a disability-adjusted life year is essentially how many years can be taken off of your life as a consequence of a particular component, so in this case, air pollution. And again, you can see that in the African countries, in developing world, the impacts are far more significant than in developed world. Which is in part why the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations have a significant focus on developing world impacts. And Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, has a particular bias towards making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient and sustainable. And absolutely, as a city, Exeter should have aspiration to become a leader in air quality. But one of the things that I think we should be thinking about is how do we also become a leader across the world for other cities, other rural areas, and the impacts that they are feeling from air quality issues. Now, Professor Shaddock, the WHO, are considered the custodians of the measure for whether we are achieving this particular goal. And the Data Integration Task Force look constantly at different methods by which they can create a more robust understanding of whether we are making progress towards achieving that. There are a whole load of research questions that will need to be addressed in order to help with that. And those things can include higher resolution. As I said, 10 kilometres by 10 kilometres is not very high resolution. So on a city basis, you may want to know at very granular levels what are the air exposures. You may need to know about how do we identify what the source was. This transboundary air pollution issue is something that's also interesting. Personal exposure is very interesting. If you happen to live in the city but you commute out to work in the countryside, for example, maybe you're exposed to completely different air quality issues than if you live in the countryside and commute into the city. And this is why there are experiments around things like having a rucksack that monitors your air pollution exposure as you walk around the city, as you walk to school, even as you're indoors, based on the fact that, as I said, indoor air quality issues are also really relevant. We've talked about transboundary effects. What mitigations could there be? How do we try and address some of these things? What solutions are there? And what are the climate co-benefits of trying to address air quality issues? So some people feel strongly about air quality but don't really care about climate. Some people feel very strongly about climate but don't really care about air quality. But actually many of the actions are likely to be positive for both. That needs robustly checking, but also how do you work with social scientists to understand how do you implement behaviour change, for example. So the World Health Organization, and I've taken this directly from their website, note that there are a number of interventions that are possible to prevent disease from air pollution. So for ambient air pollution, they suggest things like putting in place industrial emission controls, developing efficient transport options, as we've discussed today, but also things like understanding what energy options might exist. Similarly, for household air pollution, they talk about things like using efficient fuels indoors for cooking, trying to avoid things like wood fires, coal fires, and trying to understand how some of the national performance and safety standards for these things can help to influence policy change. One of the things that I think we could consider as a city is that the WHO have something called the Breathe Life Network, and this is really focused on trying to ensure that there is community action and that cities take some responsibility not only for their own impact, but also for understanding and supporting those that are less able to do so. So you can see at the bottom there that there are a number of different areas that they provide recommendations on, but most importantly, you can see that just by small numbers of cities joining up, you can have significant impact on the number of citizens that are supported. I think, you know, the fact that we've got a good grouping of people here, we've got plenty of expertise, we've got the Met Office, we've got the lead of the WHO Data Integration Task Force, we've got a number of innovative suppliers who are trying to address some of these problems. Exeter could be fantastic at doing that. And a final word of warning, lies, damn lies in statistics. So when the WHO published the map that the Data Integration Task Force had created, President Trump decided that tweeting it would be an appropriate thing to do, but with his own special twist. So the map is actually a reasonably good reflection of the map that the WHO have proposed, although we do suspect that there's been a bit of whitening out of the US. And it does highlight that air pollution issues are most prevalent in Africa. But the statement that 91% of the population, brackets none in the US, are exposed to air pollution concentrations above the WHO suggested level is, well, clearly crazy. But I think something else that is interesting is that Trump has obviously noted there, but he doesn't believe that American taxpayers and American workers should be paying to clean up other countries' pollution. And I think that's something else that we should be considering. First of all, that people in Exeter will no doubt be impacted by pollution that is created elsewhere, but also that the things that we do will be impacting others. And there are some real interesting questions of social justice that we should be thinking about as a city, as citizens, as entities within those cities, to try and understand what might we be able to do to help both the people that we live around and live near, but also the global community. And on that note, I will finish up.
It's hard to think of the biggest consumers in the world not actually creating any pollution. Yeah, think on that one some more. Righto, some questions for Beccy, please. Okay, you've got a microphone now, and if you can just introduce yourself.
Yeah, it's Maria Athanasiadou from the Met Office. Your last comment about transboundary pollution, so actually there are studies, and Matt and his team have done some, and it's a shame he didn't show some of it, that even for Exeter, some of the pollution, especially sometimes, does come all the way from the US, and that is quite a long percentage, maybe Matt remembers more, so it's really very kind of, so it was a comment.
I think it's also very interesting that particulate matter 2.5, it's easy to think about things like coal fires generating those, but particulate matter itself can also be some of the sources that Matt mentioned that are kind of natural. So dust, Saharan dust, is more well known as being something that's transported around. People kind of talk about it as covering their cars. What people don't necessarily think about is the fact that that has a health impact too. And we can't really do a great deal about Saharan dust, arguably. So where we can do things about things, maybe we should think more about that, but also the things around creation of solutions, and we've obviously got some examples of organisations that are doing that here, to things that we can't change is also important.
Okay, further questions? Looking around the room. Across the back here.
Alex Bullied from Environmental Health at the City Council. It was a comment about the social justice aspect again. And if you look at the data within Exeter, the highest pollution levels we measure are on East Wanford Hill, which is on the Heaventry corridor into town. The residents of East Wanford Hill don't have cars. They don't have anywhere to park. And yet everyone who drives past their front door makes their location the worst in the city.
I think that's also a really interesting point, because I think it leads to some of the things that we were discussing on our table around how data can be used to address some of these issues, and immediate thoughts around things like how do you take the safest route into town from, if you're cycling, for example. The fact that there are so many different factors that people need to consider when thinking about what action they're going to take is relevant to most environmental impacts. So climate is exactly the same. People want to be able to do something, but we need to make it easy for people, and trying to understand how can we make it easier for people not to drive past Wanford Hill and create these problems, I think is something that we should be considering.
Looking around. Yes, please.
Hi, it's Suzanne Wolford at Fitancy again. You've mentioned agriculture, and unless we're farmers, and there will be farmers obviously all around Devon, but what can we do with, or we probably can't do much, but it's clearly, transport is an issue that we can all help with. There are things that we can, behavioural change that we can do, but what are the solutions, or what can we do about this, the huge impact that agriculture is playing?
Okay, so I think the first answer to that is there are more things that need to be looked into on that, to understand what are the trade-offs between new farming practices, productivity, people being able to utilise different food sources. But fundamentally, agriculture is largely about creation of food for us. And things like fertiliser, for example, can create significant air quality issue eventually. And so therefore little things like considering use of sustainably farmed foods, organic foods, are likely to have incremental benefits. I think the other thing is that community pressure is one of the most significant things that you see as having a drive. So the plastics agenda of the moment is, people have known about plastics in the ocean for a long time from a science perspective. It took David Attenborough showing a sort of ailing whale for people to want to take action, and then the public drive behind it, and change happens as a consequence. So if the public can drive behind the fact that we need changes to farming practice that don't result in the farming community being completely unable to sustain themselves financially, but do eventually lead to change that enables us to improve air quality, those are the sorts of things that can be done. So I think it's not an easy answer. There is no easy solution for us as citizens right now, but being aware of the problem and being able to highlight that problem eventually results in change.
Okay, time for one last question. Let's look around. Oh, sorry, Gabriel.
There are some great local organic veg box schemes around. Give them a go. That will help.
So eat local. Try not to eat things that have been transported 10,000 miles across the surface of the earth, or through the airspace, more importantly. And yeah, have you enjoyed this session? I have. Can we have a round of applause for all three of our speakers? Thank you, Beccy. Righto, that draws the actual conference part to an end, but we do have our exhibitors here from Plain Air, from Co-Cars, and from Travel Devon. If you've not had an opportunity to talk to them, I would encourage you to do so. There is still networking time available. We also have a couple of parish notes, and I'll start off with an ExIST parish note, and that is that on October the 3rd will be our next quarterly event, and that's how to access capital to grow your STEM business. So if you've got organisations that you're either working in or working with that might have an interest in that, we'd strongly encourage you to come along to the next ExIST event. But Catherine, if I can invite you on.
Handily appearing on the screen. Tickets are now available for the October event, so you can go find those on Eventbrite, and the link will be on the ExIST website. But a few things sort of wider around the patch that we've been asked to let you know about. So first off, Chris from Planet Earth Games was hoping to come today but can't because it's on Saturday. So Planet Earth Games is a great event for getting young people and families and people of all ages, but really targeted at getting young people engaged in the environment through physical activity and sport. So if you have any young people like that in your life, or you're a family you want to go, there's still tickets, I think, for Saturday, and lots of really fun events going on in Exeter for that. Then we've got the Tech Southwest Awards are open for applications at the moment. So if you want to put in your business or another business, there's lots of different exciting award categories. And then a couple of other events that are going to be happening here around. On the 15th of July, we'll have a myth-busting artificial intelligence event here. I was going to say AI, but yesterday I found out that in the farming community that means artificial insemination and causes some complications, so I'll be very clear. And so Impact Lab's putting that on with ESA, so Donna can wave at you from over there. 25th. Yeah. So the 15th is a different event. 25th, thanks Donna. And then in September, tickets will soon be available for the very popular Tech Exeter conference that will be at the business school on the 11th of September. So if you want to know more about any events, they'll be on the calendar on the ExIST website, or you can come talk to any of us. And if you're a STEM business that wants to find out about all the different funding opportunities, then tickets are available now. But thank you for coming, and please go visit our SME showcase and have a chat.